She stood in the wagon bed like cargo waiting to be claimed, bill of sale folded in her hands, and Caleb Mercer wondered if a man could buy his way out of loneliness. The paper said Grace Adeline Whitmore. Whoever wrote it couldn't spell. The ink had bled in the August heat, turned her name into something unrecognizable. $300. Same price as 2 breeding mares. She didn't look at him when she took his hand to step down. He didn't blame her. The cattle pen smelled like dust and other people's mistakes. Men watched from the general store porch, chewing tobacco, saying nothing. The kind of silence that meant judgment without the courtesy of speaking it aloud. He turned his horse toward home. She followed on foot, no belongings but the dress she wore and the contract in her pocket. No one in town said goodbye. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had turned the dust to gold, and neither of them had spoken a word. The house had 3 rooms and 2 graves out back, and Caleb figured that said everything Grace needed to know about why he'd bought himself some company. He dismounted in the yard, gestured toward the structure. Weathered wood, tin roof catching the last of the daylight, porch with 2 rocking chairs, one missing a slat, the kind of place that looked like someone had tried once and given up. Bedrooms through there, he said, nodding toward the interior. You'll take it. I'll bunk in the barn. She stood in the dust, still holding herself like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. That won't be necessary. Ain't proper otherwise. You needn't inconvenience yourself on my account, Mr. Mercer. The Mr. landed between them like a fence post. He cleared his throat. Caleb's fine. Yes, sir. Hell, he showed her inside. The main room was sparse, table, 2 chairs, fireplace cold even in August. The piano stood against the far wall, covered in a dust sheet that hadn't been moved in 4 years. His wife's, he didn't mention it. The bedroom was small, bed frame, thin mattress, 1 window facing east. A wooden cross hung on the wall, previous owner's doing, not his. Grace stepped to the threshold but didn't enter. She stood framed in the doorway, half in shadow, half in the light from the window behind, like she was caught between 2 places and couldn't decide which one would hurt less. The contract specifies 6 months, she said, voice level. I understand the terms. Cooking, cleaning, mending. I'll earn what you paid. I know. I won't. She stopped, then started again. I won't accept anything beyond the terms. It took him a second to understand. When he did, his gut twisted. Ma'am, I ain't that kind of man. They all say that. Fair enough. I'll get water from the well, she said. If you'll show me where. He did. Showed her the kitchen, the root cellar, the hen house with 6 laying hens that needed feeding. She listened without comment, hands folded at her waist, spine straight, like she'd done this before, like she'd learned how to make herself small in a strange man's house. When he ran out of things to show her, he retreated to the porch. The sun dropped fast. By the time it touched the horizon, the heat had eased into something bearable. Caleb sat in the intact rocking chair, hat on his knee, watching the sky bleed out. Inside, he could hear her moving. Careful steps, the scrape of the kettle. He'd meant to make coffee, his evening habit, but couldn't figure how to walk back in there without it looking like something it wasn't. After a while, he got up, went to the kitchen. She was standing at the stove, back to him. Coffee's on, he said, if you want some. She glanced over her shoulder. Thank you. He poured 2 cups, left hers on the table without a word, and went back outside. Through the window, he watched her stare at the cup for a long time before she touched it, like she was testing whether there were strings attached. Finally, she picked it up, held it with both hands, steam rising between her fingers. He turned away, felt something in his chest unclench. She drank it. That was something. Night came. He'd given her a lamp for the bedroom, shown her how to work the wick. Now the light glowed soft through the curtain. He stood in the barn, hands on the stall rail, telling himself he'd sleep fine in the hay. He didn't. An hour passed, then 2. The horses shifted in their stalls, blew soft through their noses. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote called and got no answer. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd stood in that doorway, half in, half out, like she was deciding whether to stay or bolt. Eventually he gave up, walked out into the yard, boots crunching on the dry earth. The moon was near full, turning everything silver and black. His feet took him to the cottonwood. The graves were simple. 2 headstones, names carved deep so they'd last. Sarah Mercer, 1851-1885. Mary Mercer, born and died August 1885. He knelt in the dirt, same as he did most nights when the house got too quiet, put his hands on the ground like he was trying to reach through the earth and touch them. Sarah, he said, barely a whisper. I bought a woman today. The words sat wrong in his mouth. Paid $300, like she was cattle. Silence. Just wind in the leaves, the distant yip of coyotes. I told myself it was practical. Told myself she needed work and I needed help. That's the lie I've been saying all day. He pressed his palms harder into the dirt. Truth is, I can't take another winter alone. Can't take another morning waking up and remembering you're gone. Can't take the quiet. It's killing me, Sarah. Slow, but it's killing me. His voice cracked. He stopped, breathed, tried again. I know you'd hate me for it, buying a person, treating her like property just 'cause the law says I can. He looked at the names carved in stone, but I didn't know what else to do. He stayed there, kneeling, until his knees ached and the moon had moved a hand's width across the sky. When he finally stood, he brushed the dirt from his hands and turned toward the house. The bedroom curtain moved, just a flicker, then it fell still. She'd been watching. He walked back to the barn, lay down in the hay, and stared at the rafters until his eyes burned. Inside the bedroom, Grace let the curtain fall and stepped back into the dark. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, and thought about the man she'd seen on his knees in the moonlight. She'd expected cruelty. Expected him to come to the bedroom door eventually, contract in hand, reminding her what he'd paid for. Instead, he'd knelt in the dirt and wept. Whatever he paid for, she thought, it wasn't labor. She lay down on the thin mattress, still in her dress, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time since the wagon, she wondered what kind of man buys a woman just to kneel in the dirt and weep. By the third morning, they'd learned each other's rhythms, how to pass in doorways without touching, how to sit at the same table without talking, how to pretend this arrangement was anything close to normal. Grace woke before dawn. Caleb heard her moving in the kitchen, smelled coffee before he'd even pulled his boots on. When he came inside, there were 2 cups on the table. She was already outside, feeding the chickens. He drank his coffee on the porch, watching the sun climb. The boards creaked under his weight. 3 loose planks on the east side that he'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. He knew which ones made noise. Stepped around them out of habit. When Grace came back from the hen house, she walked the same path he did, avoided the same boards. He noticed. Didn't say anything. They ate breakfast in silence. She at the table, him on the porch rail. Physical distance that felt safer than sitting across from each other, like they were something they weren't. After, she washed the dishes. He went to mend fence. By noon, the heat was brutal. He came back to the house for water, found her inside, with the windows open, trying to catch any breeze that would come. She'd been cleaning. The dust sheet was off the piano. She stood in front of it, one hand resting on the closed lid. Didn't hear him in the doorway. You play? He asked. She pulled her hand back like she'd been burned, turned, spine straight. I apologize. I overstepped. Didn't say that. I shouldn't have touched. Can you play? She hesitated. I had lessons. Before. The word carried weight, before whatever fall had brought her to a labor broker in a cattle town. My wife used to play, he said. The words came out rougher than he meant. Died before she could teach our girl. Grace's expression shifted, something careful and sad. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Mercer. Caleb. Yes, sir. He turned to leave, stopped. If you want to play it, go ahead. Ain't doing nobody any good just sitting there. She didn't answer. But later, when he was out by the corral, he heard it, soft at first, a few tentative notes, like she was asking permission from the keys themselves. Then something more, Chopin, maybe, something refined that didn't belong in a house this rough. He stood there, hammer in hand, listening. Hadn't heard music in 4 years. Thought he'd forgotten what it sounded like. His throat closed up. He turned away, went back to work, but the sound followed him across the yard like a ghost he'd been trying to forget. That afternoon, Sam Oakes rode up, said he was checking on strays near the property line, but Caleb knew better. Sam had heard about the help. Grace was inside. Sam dismounted, tied his horse, looked at the house like he could see through the walls. You doing all right, son? Fine. Heard you hired somebody. Word travels fast. It does when you buy a woman at a cattle auction. Caleb's jaw tightened. Legal contract. She needed work. Sam shook his head, pulled off his hat, wiped his forehead. Hell, Caleb. You didn't hire nobody. You bought her. Ain't like that. Then what's it like? Caleb didn't have an answer that didn't make him sound like a liar. Sam studied him. That girl's quality. Heard her playing piano from the road. How'd somebody like that end up at a labor broker? Ain't my business to ask. You made it your business when you paid for her. Sam's voice softened. Look, I ain't judging, but you know what this looks like. Town's already talking. Let him talk. Reverend Hale's been asking questions. That stopped him. Reverend Hale didn't ask questions. He delivered verdicts dressed up as concern. Sam put his hat back on. You bought yourself a conscience, Caleb, and she ain't gonna let you sleep easy. He mounted up, rode off before Caleb could respond. Inside, Grace stood at the window, watching through the gap in the curtain. She'd heard most of it, heard Sam call her bought, heard Caleb defend the arrangement without defending her. She stepped back, returned to the piano, sat down. Her hands found the keys again. This time she didn't hesitate. The music filled the house, not tentative anymore, but deliberate. A hymn her mother used to play, "Come thou fount of every blessing." The irony wasn't lost on her. On the porch, Caleb sat in the intact rocking chair listening. The sun was starting to drop, turning the sky orange and pink. The music drifted out through the open windows, and for a few minutes, just a few, the house felt less like a tomb. He closed his eyes, let the sound wash over him, let himself pretend, just for a moment, that this was what he'd meant it to be. Not a transaction, not loneliness dressed up as practicality. Just two people under the same roof, trying to survive. Inside, Grace finished the hymn, lifted her hands from the keys, and sat in the silence that followed. Through the window, she could see him on the porch, head bowed, shoulders shaking. She didn't go to him, didn't say anything. But she didn't stop playing, either. The problem with kindness, Grace thought, was that it made you forget you were supposed to leave. She'd been at the ranch 5 days. 5 days of coffee left on the table. 5 days of him working outside while she played piano inside. 5 days of careful distance that somehow felt closer than anything she'd known in years. It was dangerous. That morning, she'd woken before dawn and found him already gone. The coffee pot was cold. His bedroll in the barn hadn't been slept in, or he'd been up so early the hay hadn't had time to hold his shape. She made breakfast, left his plate covered on the stove, and went to sweep the porch. That's when she found him, sitting on the steps, hat in his hands, staring at a piece of paper. She stopped in the doorway. He didn't turn. "Mr. Mercer?" He folded the paper quickly, too quickly. "Mornin'. Your breakfast is inside." Obliged. He didn't move. Just sat there, shoulders tight, jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't spit out. She should have gone back inside. Should have left him alone. Instead, she asked, "Are you all right?" He laughed, short and bitter. "No, ma'am. Don't reckon I am." She waited. After a long moment, he unfolded the paper, held it out to her, the bill of sale. Her contract. She took it, read her name, misspelled, read the price, $300, 6 months' labor, her signature at the bottom, his above it. "Found it in my vest pocket," he said. Been carrying it around like it was something to be proud of." Her hands shook. She gave it back. "I keep telling myself it's legal," he said. "Keep telling myself you needed work and I needed help, and that makes it square." He looked at her then, eyes red-rimmed. "But it ain't square, is it? The law says—" "Hell with the law." He stood, paced to the porch rail. "I bought a human being, put a price on you like you were livestock. Don't matter what this paper says. That's what I did." Grace folded her arms across her chest. "Yes." The word landed like a stone in still water. He flinched. "Why'd you come then? If you knew what it was?" "Because the alternative was worse." "What was the alternative?" She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who knelt at graves and wept, who gave her his bedroom and slept in hay, who couldn't meet her eyes when he handed her coffee. "Starvation," she said quietly. "Or worse men than you." He turned away, gripped the porch rail, knuckles white. "I want you to know something," he said. "You don't got to stay the full 6 months, if you want to go." She went still. "The contract, hell with it. You want to leave? I'll give you $50 and a horse. Letter of reference if you need it. No questions asked." "Why?" "'Cause you ain't livestock," his voice cracked. "And I got no right keeping you here if you don't want to be." The words hung in the air between them. Grace felt something shift in her chest, not quite trust, but close. Closer than she'd been to it in a long time. "Where would I go?" she asked. "Wherever you want." "And if I have nowhere?" He turned back to her. "Then you stay. But it's your choice, not the papers. Not mine, yours." She stared at him. This broken man who'd bought her and was now trying to give her back to herself. "You paid $300 for labor," she said slowly. "Now you're offering to pay me to leave? Call it what it is. I'm trying to do right." Grace didn't answer right away. Couldn't. She'd been through 2 contracts before this one. Both men had smiled when they signed the papers. Both had locked their doors at night. This man was offering her the key. "I'll think on it," she said finally. "Fair enough." She went inside, left him on the porch with the contract in his hands. The next morning, she walked out past the barn, following a worn path through the grass. She'd seen him take it at night, seen him disappear into the shadows beyond the fence line. The cottonwood stood alone, massive and old. Beneath it, 2 headstones: Sarah Mercer, 1851 to 1885. Mary Mercer, born and died, August 1885. Grace stood there, reading the names, doing the arithmetic. Sarah died in childbirth. The baby died 2 days later, 4 years ago, this month. He'd been alone for 4 years. She knelt, brushed dust from the stones. Someone had left wildflowers once, dried now, brown and brittle. She gathered them up, carried them away, and came back with fresh ones from the field, placed them carefully between the graves. A man doesn't buy company, she thought. He buys witness. Someone to see he's still alive. She stayed a while, said a quiet prayer, not for the dead, but for the living. For a man so broken he'd spent $300 just to have someone to say good morning to. Then she walked back to the house. That evening, Caleb found the wildflowers on the graves, stood there in the fading light staring at them. Fresh ones. Indian paintbrush and Mexican hat, not store-bought, picked from his own land. He didn't have to ask who'd left them. He walked back to the house, found her at the piano. She was playing something soft, something he didn't recognize. He stood in the doorway, hat in his hands. "Thank you," he said. She stopped playing, didn't turn around. "You're welcome. Yet you didn't have to." "I know." He wanted to say more. Wanted to tell her that he knew what it meant, that small act of kindness, that it was the first time anyone had touched those graves besides him in 4 years. Instead, he just stood there, listening to the silence between them. Finally, she started playing again. He sat on the porch, boots on the steps, and listened until the stars came out. And for the first time since Sarah died, Caleb Mercer thought maybe, just maybe, he'd done one thing right. Reverend Josiah Hale believed in 2 kinds of salvation, the kind that came through repentance and the kind that came through his personal intervention, and in Caleb Mercer's case, he intended to provide both. Sunday morning came hot and still. No breeze, just the weight of August pressing down on everything that lived. Caleb stood in front of the mirror in the barn, trying to make himself presentable. Clean shirt, shaved jaw, hat brushed free of dust. Grace had suggested church the night before, said it might quiet some of the talk if folks saw them together, proper-like. He'd agreed, though his gut told him it was a mistake. She emerged from the house in a gray dress he hadn't seen before. Must have had it packed somewhere, saved for Sundays. Her hair was pinned up, hands folded at her waist. She looked like quality. Made him wonder again how she'd ended up at a labor broker. They rode to town in the wagon, didn't speak. The silence between them had changed over the past week. Less hostile, more careful, like they were both carrying something fragile and afraid to drop it. The church was white clapboard, steeple pointing at heaven like an accusation. Folks were already gathering outside. Ranchers in their cleanest shirts, wives in cotton dresses, children running between the wagons. Conversation stopped when Caleb pulled up. Everyone stared. He helped Grace down. She took his hand without hesitation, stepped to the ground with her spine straight and her chin level. Didn't look at anyone, just walked toward the church door like she owned every inch of ground between the wagon and the threshold. He followed. Inside, they took a pew near the back. Grace sat, hands folded in her lap. Caleb kept his hat on his knee, felt every eye in the room crawling over them like ants on a carcass. Sam Oakes caught his eye from across the aisle, gave him a look that said, "You sure about this, son?" Too late now. Reverend Hale climbed to the pulpit. Tall man, thin, with pale hands that had never worked a day of honest labor. He smiled at the congregation, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Brothers and sisters," he began, voice carrying easy through the small space. "Today, I wish to speak on the sin of possession." Caleb's stomach dropped. "The law," Hale continued, "permits many things, permits a man to purchase a contract of labor, permits the binding of one soul to another through legal document." He paused, let the words settle. "But does the law make it moral?" Silence, heavy and thick. "The Lord teaches us that we are all equal in his eyes, that no man may own another. Yet in our midst," he looked directly at Caleb, "we see arrangements that test this teaching, arrangements that walk the line between employment and bondage." Grace's hands tightened in her lap. Caleb could feel her breathing change beside him. "A man may purchase a contract," Hale said, "but he cannot purchase a soul. The law may permit what the Lord condemns, and we as his servants must ask ourselves, do we serve the law of man or the law of God?" The congregation shifted, murmured. Someone coughed. Caleb stared at his hands, wanted to stand up, walk out, take Grace with him, but moving now would look like guilt. Hell, he was guilty. The sermon continued for another 20 minutes. Hale never said Caleb's name. Didn't have to. Everyone knew who he was talking about. When it finally ended, when the last hymn had been sung and the benediction given, folks filed out in silence. No one spoke to Caleb. No one looked at Grace, except the Reverend. He caught them on the steps, moved through the crowd like Moses parting the sea, hand extended. "Brother Mercer, Miss Whitmore. A word, if I may?" Caleb stopped. Grace stayed at his side. "Reverend," Caleb said, kept his voice level. "I trust my sermon was enlightening." It was clear enough. Hale smiled, turned to Grace. "Miss Whitmore, I wonder if I might speak with you privately. I've made inquiries on your behalf. There's a position available with the Carter family in town. Respectable work, fair wages. A place where you might—" "No, thank you." Grace said, voice like ice over steel. Hale blinked. My dear, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly, Reverend. She met his eyes. I appreciate your concern, but I am not a child in need of rescue. You're in a vulnerable position. It is my duty as a servant of God. Your duty is to your congregation, not to my circumstances. Color rose in Hale's cheeks. He turned to Caleb. Brother Mercer, surely you see the impropriety of this arrangement? Legal contract, Caleb said. All proper and signed. The law permits many sins. Does your conscience? That hit. Caleb felt it land right in his chest. Because Hale was right. The law did permit it. Didn't make it right. But Grace spoke before he could. Reverend Hale. Her voice cut through the air like a knife. You came here to save me, but I don't need saving. Not from him. Miss Whitmore, you are confusing gratitude with, I am confusing nothing, sir. She stepped forward. Small woman, educated accent, spine like iron. I have spent my entire adult life being told what I need, where I should go, who I should trust. Men of God, men of law, men who smile and sign papers and lock doors at night. The crowd had gone silent, everyone listening now. For once, Grace said, I am deciding for myself, and I decide to stay. Hale stared at her, then at Caleb, then back at her. You are making a grave mistake, he said quietly. Perhaps, but it's mine to make. The Reverend's jaw tightened. He looked at the crowd, saw their faces, saw he was losing them, and nodded once, sharp and cold. As you wish. I shall pray for you both. He turned and walked away, black coat trailing in the dust. The ride home was silent. Caleb's hands shook on the reins. He could still feel the weight of every eye in that church, could still hear Hale's voice. Does your conscience permit it? No, it didn't. Grace sat beside him, staring at the horizon, face unreadable. You didn't have to do that, Caleb said finally. Do what? Defend me. She turned to look at him. I didn't defend you, Mr. Mercer. I defended my right to choose. Same thing. No, it isn't. They didn't speak again until they reached the ranch. That night, Caleb sat on the porch alone. Inside, Grace was playing the piano. Something slow and sad. A requiem, maybe. He pulled the bill of sale from his pocket, looked at it in the lamplight. $300, her name misspelled. The thing that had been shame this morning was something different now. Protection. The Reverend had wanted to rescue her, take her to another family, another contract, another set of walls. Call it salvation, and feel righteous about it. The paper in Caleb's hand said she'd chosen this place, chosen him. Even if the choice had been made under duress, even if the original transaction was wrong, she'd stood in front of that church and claimed it as hers. I decided to stay. He folded the paper, put it back in his pocket. Inside, the music stopped. Through the window, he saw Grace standing at the piano, hands on the keys, head bowed. After a moment, she lifted her hands and started playing again. Louder this time, defiant. Caleb closed his eyes and listened. The town had judged him guilty. Grace had just defended a man who'd bought her like livestock. And neither of them knew what the hell they were doing anymore. The storm came fast, the way guilt does, sudden, violent, and impossible to outrun. It had been building for 3 days. Caleb felt it in his bones, saw it in the way the cattle bunched together in the far pasture, the way the horses went restless in their stalls. The air pressed down heavy and electric, making it hard to breathe. Grace felt it too. She moved through this house like she was waiting for something to break. On the 4th day, the sky went black at noon. Caleb was mending the corral fence when the first gust hit, nearly knocked him off his feet. He looked up, saw the wall of dust and darkness rolling in from the west, and ran for the house. Grace, She met him at the door, already pulling on her shawl. Stay inside, he said. I gotta secure the barn. I'll help. Stay inside, sharper than he meant. Please. She stepped back. He saw something flash in her eyes, fear maybe, or anger, but he didn't have time. The wind was already tearing at the roof, pulling at the loose boards like it wanted to take the whole house apart. He ran for the barn. The storm hit like God's fist. Rain came in sheets, horizontal and cold. Lightning cracked so close he felt it in his teeth. Thunder rolled continuous, no gaps between strikes. The dry creek bed near the property line, the one that had been dust and rocks for months, started to fill. Fast. Too fast. He got the horses into their stalls, secured the doors, checked the loft. By the time he ran back to the house, he was soaked through and half blind from the rain. Grace. No answer. He shook water from his eyes, looked around. Kitchen empty, bedroom door open, room dark. Grace. He ran outside, circled the house. Nothing. Checked the root cellar, the hen house, called her name until his voice went raw. Gone. His chest went tight. He ran toward the fence line, the direction of the creek. That's when he saw it. Her shawl, caught on the barbed wire near the water. The creek was a river now, brown and churning, pulling at the banks. Debris rushed past. Branches, fence posts, things he couldn't name in the rain and failing light. Grace! Nothing, just the roar of water and wind, and his own heart trying to break through his ribs. She'd run. During the storm, tried to leave, got caught in the flood. No, not again. Christ, not again. He stumbled along this bank, searching, slipping in the mud. Couldn't see more than 10 feet. Rain hammered his back, lightning split the sky, and he kept calling her name. Like it was a prayer that might work this time, even though it hadn't worked for Sarah. Sam found him an hour later, waist deep in the creek, digging through debris like a madman. Caleb! He didn't hear. Kept searching, pulling at branches, convinced he'd find her body tangled in the roots. Sam waded in, grabbed his shoulders, shook him. Caleb, stop! She's gone? She's in the water? Maybe she ain't. Sam pulled him toward the bank. Maybe she ran, son. Maybe she left. Caleb stopped, stared at him. In this, she'd die. Maybe dying was better than staying. The words hit like a physical blow. Caleb doubled over, hands on his knees, couldn't breathe. Sam gripped his shoulder. Listen to me. We'll search the high ground. The old line shack, the cottonwood grove. Places she might have taken shelter. But you gotta think clear, and right now you ain't thinking at all. Caleb straightened, nodded. Couldn't speak. They searched together, checked every structure, every stand of trees. The storm raged on, wind tearing at their clothes, rain turning the ground to soup. Nothing. Sam's voice cut through the thunder. Caleb, you've been treating her decent, I know you have. But decent ain't enough when you bought her in the first place. Caleb stopped walking. You can't buy forgiveness, Sam said. You can only earn it by letting go. Dawn came gray and cold. The storm broke just before sunrise, leaving everything drowned and quiet. Caleb stood in the yard, covered in mud, shaking. Sam had gone back to his place an hour ago, promising to return with more men if she didn't turn up. He didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to keep breathing when every breath felt like another failure. Another person lost because he'd been too slow, too stupid, too goddamn selfish, too... Movement. At the tree line. He ran. She was in the old line shack 2 miles north, soaked, shivering, alive. The door hung crooked on its hinges. He pushed through, found her huddled in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees. Her dress was plastered to her skin, hair loose and dripping. She looked up when he came in. Didn't say anything, just looked at him. He knelt 5 feet away, didn't trust himself to get closer. You all right? She nodded. Small movement, unconvincing. Grace, are you hurt? No. What happened? She looked away, stared at the wall. I left. In the middle of a storm. Yes. Why? Because I can't stay. His chest hurt. Why not? Because... Her voice broke. She stopped, tried again. Because you made me feel like I mattered. And I can't let myself believe that. He didn't understand. Reached for words, found none. She kept going, voice raw and shaking. I sold myself to a labor broker 3 years ago. Paid for my father's burial. He drank himself to death after we lost everything. The house, the land, my mother's grave. I had nowhere to go and no way to feed myself, so I signed a contract. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mud and tears mixed. First man kept me for 2 months. Made me sleep on the floor, next to his bed so I'd be close if he needed something. Second man was worse. Smiled when he signed the papers. Locked the door at night. Caleb felt sick. I ran from both of them, she said. Got labeled difficult, ungrateful. No one wanted to take me after that, except at a discount. That's how I ended up in Sagebrush. She looked at him. That's how I ended up in your wagon. Grace, I came here expecting the same thing. Waited for you to come to the bedroom door. Waited for the smile to drop, for the lock to turn. But you didn't. Her voice went quieter. You gave me the bed, made me coffee. Let me play your dead wife's piano. Asked me if I wanted to leave. She pulled her knees tighter to her chest. Every time I let myself believe I was safe, I lost everything. My home, my mother, my dignity. I can't do it again. I won't. Silence. Just rain dripping through the roof, their breathing. Caleb's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the floor. You think you're the only one who's scared? She looked at him. My wife died, screaming for me to save her. The words came out rough, broken. I was moving cattle. Thought I had time. Thought the baby wasn't due for another week. By the time I got back, she was already gone. He couldn't look at Grace. Stared at his hands instead. Baby held on for 2 days. Mary, we named her Mary. She died in my arms. Nothing I could do. Too small. Too early. Just stop breathing. His throat closed. He pushed through it. I buried them both under the cottonwood, and I've been talking to dirt ever since, trying to figure out how to live with the fact that I killed them both by being too slow. Grace went very still. I bought you. He finally looked at her. Because this house is too damn quiet. Because I've been talking to ghosts for 4 years and I'm tired of hearing my own voice answer back. Because I thought if I could just have someone here, someone breathing, maybe I'd stop wanting to join him under that tree. She stared at him, eyes wide. You asked why I bought you. His voice cracked. That's why. Not for cooking. Not for help around the ranch. Because I was going to eat my gun, and I was scared if I was alone one more winter I'd do it. The words sat in the air between them, true and ugly and finally spoken. Grace's face crumpled. She pressed her hands to her mouth. You didn't save me, Caleb said quietly. I tried to save myself by buying you, and that makes me the worst kind of coward. She shook her head. No. Yes. He stood. You want to leave? I'll take you to town today. Give you money, give you the horse, write you a letter. You want to stay, you stay. But either way, you deserve to know the truth about what you walked into. He turned toward the door. Caleb. He stopped. First time she'd used his name. She stood, crossed the small space between them, stopped a foot away, looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I don't want to leave, she whispered. I want to stop being afraid. I don't know how to help you with that. Neither do I. She wiped her eyes. But maybe we can figure it out together. He looked at her. This woman who'd been sold and used and thrown away. This woman who'd run into a storm because kindness terrified her more than drowning. This woman who was still standing here, still breathing, still trying. Yeah, he said, voice rough. Maybe we can. They walked back to the ranch in silence. The sun was up now, weak and watery through the clouds. The world looked scrubbed raw, mud everywhere, branches down, fence posts leaning. Grace's hand brushed his once. Accident, maybe, or maybe not. He didn't pull away. That night, she played the piano, something slow and quiet. He sat on the porch listening. Through the window, he could see her silhouette against the lamplight, small and straight-backed. Still here, still choosing to be here. He closed his eyes and let the music wash over him. And for the first time in 4 years, Caleb Mercer understood what Sam had meant. You couldn't buy forgiveness. You could only earn it by being honest enough to break. For 3 days, they lived in the same house like ghosts passing through walls. Present, but not touching. Breathing, but not speaking. Alive, but not living. Grace stayed inside mostly. Caleb worked the fence lines, the corrals, anything that kept him outside from dawn until the light failed. When they passed in doorways, they stepped aside, careful not to brush shoulders. When they sat for meals, she ate at the table, he ate standing at the stove, or outside, on the steps. The coffee pot stayed cold. Neither of them made it. The piano stayed silent. The porch boards didn't creak because neither of them walked where the other might hear. They left notes on the table instead of speaking. Need flour from town. Fix the east gate. Thank you. Small pieces of paper that said nothing real, nothing that mattered. Grace moved through the rooms like a woman waiting for something to break. Caleb moved through the days like a man already dead. On the 4th night, he couldn't take it anymore. He found himself at the cottonwood without deciding to go there. His feet just knew the path, knew the worn dirt and the roots that broke through the ground and the 2 stones that stood like accusations under the massive branches. Sarah Mercer, 1851 to 1885. Mary Mercer, born and died August 1885. The wildflowers Grace had left were still there, dried now, brown at the edges. He knelt between the graves, put his hands flat on the dirt like he was trying to hold them down or hold himself up. He didn't know which anymore. Sarah. His voice came out rough, unused. He cleared his throat, tried again. I bought a woman, Sarah. Paid $300, like she was cattle. The wind moved through the leaves above him. Night sounds, crickets, a distant owl, the restless shift of horses in the barn. I told myself it was practical. Told myself she needed work and I needed help. That's the lie I've been saying. The lie I've been living. He pressed his hands harder into the earth. Truth is, I was so damn lonely I couldn't see straight. House was too quiet. Kept hearing your voice. Kept turning around thinking you were there. And you weren't. You were here, in the ground. And I didn't know how to keep breathing through another winter alone. His throat closed. He waited for it to pass. So I bought her, bought a human being, and told myself it was mercy. Told myself I was helping her when really I was just... Christ, Sarah, I was just trying not to eat a bullet. The words hung in the air, true and ugly. She's scared, he said. Scared of being kind to, because every time she lets herself hope, it gets taken away. And I made it worse. Made her feel like she mattered, and then she found out I bought her to keep myself alive, and now she don't know if any of it was real. He looked at the headstones. Sarah's name carved deep, letters still sharp after 4 years. I don't know if it was real either, he whispered. I don't know if I care about her or if I just care about not being alone. And that's the worst part. Not knowing if I'm capable of something decent or if I'm just using her, same as the others did, just with better manners. A coyote called from somewhere out in the darkness. Another answered. Caleb bowed his head. You would have hated me for this, he said, for buying her, for treating another person like property, just 'cause the law says I can. You would have looked at me with those eyes, the ones that saw straight through every lie I told myself. And you would have said, Caleb Mercer, you know better. He did know better. That was the hell of it. I gotta let her go, he said, voice breaking. Even if it kills me. 'Cause keeping her here, that'd kill what's left of the man you married. That'd kill the part of me you loved. He stayed there, kneeling, hands in the dirt. The moon rose higher, the stars wheeled overhead. The earth was cold and hard and unforgiving under his palms. I'm gonna give her money, he said, enough to get wherever she wants to go. Gonna give her the horse, the saddle, a letter if she needs it. Gonna tear up that goddamn contract and let her choose for real this time. No debt, no obligation, just free. His voice went quieter. And if she leaves, I'll bury myself next to you and Mary and call it done. But at least I'll die knowing I did one thing right. Silence. Just the wind and the crickets and his own ragged breathing. I'm sorry, he whispered, for failing you, for failing Mary, for failing her, for failing myself. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so goddamn sorry. He pressed his forehead to the ground between the graves, stayed there until his back ached and his knees went numb and the moon had moved a quarter of the way across the sky. When he finally stood, he brushed the dirt from his hands and looked at the names one more time. I loved you, he said. I love you still, but I can't keep living in this grave with you. He turned toward the house. The lamp was burning in the bedroom window. Grace was still awake. Tomorrow, he'd tell her. Tomorrow, he'd give her the choice he should have given her from the start. Not because he wanted to, because it was the only way to prove he was still a man worth something. Inside the bedroom, Grace sat at the window watching the cottonwood. She'd seen him walk out there an hour ago. Watched him kneel, watched him break. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she knew. He was saying goodbye. She pressed her hand to the glass, cold against her palm. Between them, glass and distance and walls they'd both built to survive. She didn't know how to tear them down. Didn't know if she was strong enough to try. But watching him kneel in the dirt, watching him pour his grief into the ground like an offering, she thought maybe she wanted to be. Maybe. Caleb walked back across the yard. The house stood quiet, lamp glowing soft through the curtains. Home. Or close enough to it. He climbed the porch steps, avoided the loose boards out of habit, stopped at the door. Inside, Grace stood at the window. Their eyes met through the glass. She didn't move. Neither did he. Then she stepped back, turned away, disappeared into the shadows of the room. He stood there a moment longer. Then he went to the barn, lay down in the hay, and stared at the rafters until his eyes burned. Tomorrow, he'd set her free. Tonight, he'd let himself imagine, just once, what it would feel like if she chose to stay. Round 1. Reverend Hale returned on a Tuesday with a sheriff, a Bible, and the unshakable certainty that he was doing God's work, and Caleb Mercer knew that certainty would either save Grace or destroy her. They came mid-morning. Caleb was at the well, drawing water. Grace was inside, sweeping the floor. The sound of hooves on hard dirt made him look up. 2 riders. Reverend on his black mare, Sheriff Dawson on a roan gelding. Both men sitting straight, faces set with purpose. Caleb put down the bucket, wiped his hands on his pants. They dismounted at the fence line, didn't come closer. That told him everything. Mercer, Sheriff Dawson said. Tipped his hat. Professional courtesy, nothing more. Sheriff? Reverend Hale here's made a complaint. Says you got a labor contract that might not be proper. Contract's legal. Filed at the county office. That's what I told him, Dawson said. But he's insistent. Says the woman might be held against her will. Caleb's jaw tightened. She's free to leave any time. Is she now? Reverend Hale stepped forward. Then why hasn't she? You'd have to ask her. I intend to. Hale looked toward the house. Miss Whitmore, would you join us, please? The door opened. Grace stepped onto the porch. She wore the gray Sunday dress, hair pinned up, looked at the 3 men with a calm that Caleb knew was armor. Yes, Reverend. Sheriff Dawson removed his hat. Ma'am, I apologize for the intrusion. Just need to ask you a question or two. Legal matter. Grace came down the steps, stopped between Caleb and the visitors, standing exactly in the middle, closer to Caleb, but facing the others. Ma'am, Dawson said, are you here of your own free will? I am. You're not being coerced or threatened? No. Hale's face tightened. Miss Whitmore, you needn't fear speaking the truth. We are here to protect you. I am not afraid, Reverend. Her voice was ice. and I am speaking the truth. The contract binding you to Mr. Mercer. Do you wish to be released from it? Grace hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but Caleb saw it. She doesn't have to answer that, Caleb said. He stepped forward, put himself between Grace and the men. This is my land. You got business with me, we can talk. You got business with her, you come back with a warrant. Sheriff Dawson held up a hand. Easy, Mercer, just asking questions. And I'm telling you, she don't have to answer. Hale's eyes narrowed. You speak for her now, a woman you purchased like livestock? The word hung in the air, ugly and true. Caleb felt Grace go rigid behind him. Brother Mercer, Hale continued, voice smooth as oil, I commend your hospitality, but the contract itself is morally questionable. Miss Whitmore deserves better than... You're right. Everyone stopped. Caleb turned to Grace. Give me a minute? She nodded. Small movement, uncertain. He walked to the house, went inside, pulled the Bible off the mantel. The bill of sale was still tucked between the pages where he'd put it weeks ago. He took it out, folded it once, and walked back outside. Stood in front of all of them, Grace, the sheriff, the reverend, and held up the paper. This, he said, is wrong. The contract's wrong, Caleb repeated. Was wrong from the start. Law says, I can buy a person's labor. Don't make it right. Sheriff Dawson shifted. Mercer, you don't have to. Yeah, I do. He looked at Grace. I've been carrying this around for weeks. Been telling myself it was legal, it was proper, it was just business. But it ain't. Never was. He unfolded the paper. Read it one more time. Grace Adeline Whitmore, $300, 6 months labor. Then he tore it in half. Grace's breath caught. He tore it again. Quarters. Handed her the pieces. This is yours. Do whatever you want with it. Burn it. Keep it. Don't matter. He stepped back. You want to stay, you stay. You want to go, I'll give you a horse, $100, and a letter of reference. But you ain't staying because a piece of paper says so. Not anymore. The pieces of contract fluttered in her hands. She stared at them like they might catch fire. Mr. Mercer, her voice broke. Caleb, he said. Just Caleb. Hale stepped forward. Miss Whitmore, you see? The contract is void. You are free. I have arranged a position with the Carter family in town. Respectable work. Fair wages. A place where... No. Everyone looked at Grace. She was still staring at the torn paper. Then slowly, deliberately, she let the pieces fall from her hands. They scattered in the dust at her feet. No, she said again, louder. She looked at the Reverend. You came to save me, but I don't need saving. Not from him. Hale's face flushed. Miss Whitmore, surely you understand. I understand perfectly. She turned to face him fully. You believe you're here to rescue me from bondage, but all you're offering is a different master, a different house, with a different lock on the door. That's not... It is. Her voice was steady now, cold and clear. I have been rescued before, Reverend, by men who smiled and spoke of Christian duty and handed me contracts that bound me just as surely as chains. So, forgive me if I don't trust your version of salvation. She looked at Caleb. He was standing there, hands at his sides, not reaching for her, not claiming her, just waiting. He gave me a choice, she said. Real choice. Not the kind dressed up as charity. Not the kind that comes with conditions and expectations and locks that turn at night. She gestured to the torn paper in the dust. That's freedom. And I choose... She stopped, took a breath. I choose to stay. Silence, heavy and complete. Sheriff Dawson looked at Hale, then at Caleb, then back at Grace. Ma'am, you're certain? Contract's void. You're not obligated. I'm certain. You understand you can leave at any time? Yes. And you choose to stay here? With Mr. Mercer? I do. Dawson nodded slowly, put his hat back on. All right then. That's clear enough for me. He looked at Hale. Reverend, I think we're done here. Hale's jaw worked. He stared at Grace, then at Caleb, then at the torn contract pieces blowing across the yard. You are making a grave mistake, he said quietly. Grace met his eyes. Perhaps, but it's mine to make. I shall pray for you both. We'd appreciate that, Caleb said. Meant it. Hale and the sheriff mounted up, rode off without another word. Caleb and Grace stood in the yard, watching them disappear down the road. The dust settled. A hawk cried somewhere overhead. You didn't have to do that, Caleb said finally. Do what? Defend me. Choose this. He gestured at the ranch, at himself. I gave you a way out. I know. So why'd you stay? She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd bought her and given her his bedroom, who'd knelt at graves and wept, who'd torn up a legal contract and risked losing the only thing keeping him alive. Because you let me go, she said simply. And that's the only reason worth staying. He didn't know what to say to that. Didn't have words for what was happening in his chest. She bent down, picked up one piece of the torn contract, studied it. Her name, misspelled, torn down the middle. I'm staying because I want to, she said. Not because you paid, not because I'm grateful, because I want to. She let the piece fall again, stepped over it, walked toward him, stopped a foot away. Is that all right? She asked. His throat was too tight to speak. He nodded. She smiled, small and uncertain and real. Good, she said. Then she turned and walked back to the house. He stood there in the yard, watching her go. The torn contract pieces blew across the dirt like snow. The sun was high and hot. The world kept turning. And for the first time in 4 years, Caleb Mercer believed in tomorrow. The cottonwood leaves had started to turn, just at the edges, gold creeping into green. And Caleb thought maybe that's what healing looked like. Not erasing the past, but letting something new grow alongside it. 2 weeks had passed since the Reverend left. 2 weeks of careful rebuilding, not the house. The house was fine. But the space between two people who'd been strangers and enemies and saviors and failures and were now trying to figure out what they were when nobody was watching. That morning, Grace woke before dawn and found Caleb already in the kitchen. The coffee pot was on the stove, 2 cups waiting. Mornin', he said. Good morning. They drank their coffee on the porch, sitting in the 2 rocking chairs. The boards creaked under their weight, both of them, neither avoiding the loose planks anymore. The sound was just sound now, not a warning, not a secret. Just 2 people sharing space. After breakfast, she walked out to the fence line. The same spot where she'd tried to run during the storm, where her shawl had caught on the wire and Caleb had thought she'd drowned. She stood there, one hand on the post, looking out at the land beyond, the road to town, the horizon that went on forever. She could leave, nothing stopping her now. No paper, no debt, no obligation. She stayed. Caleb watched from the porch, didn't call out, didn't go after her, just watched and waited and trusted. After a while, she turned around, walked back toward the house. He met her halfway across the yard. You all right? He asked. I was just thinking. About what? She looked at him. About what you said once. About how you paid for me. His jaw tightened. Grace, let me finish. She took a breath. You paid for me? $300 in a cattle pen? And I thought that's all I'd ever be to you? A transaction. A warm body to keep the house from being quiet. I'm sorry. I know you are. She smiled, small and sad and real. But here's what I figured out. You paid for me, but I'm the one who chose to come home. The words settled between them. Home. Some things can't be bought, she said quietly. Can't be earned. Can only be given freely, and that's the only way they're worth having. He stared at her. This woman who'd survived everything and was still standing here, still choosing this broken place and this broken man. Yeah, he said. Voice rough. Reckon that's true. She reached out, took his hand. First time she'd touched him on purpose. So I'm staying, she said. Not because of what you paid. Because of what you gave me when you let me go. He held her hand. Rough calluses against smooth skin. 2 people who'd bought and sold and broken and healed and were still figuring out how to stand. Reckon we can figure out the rest, he said. Reckon we can. That evening, she played the piano. Something he'd never heard before. Something light and hopeful. And almost happy. He sat on the porch, listening. Through the window, he could see her silhouette against the lamplight. The cottonwoods stood beyond the house, 2 graves beneath it, fresh wildflowers on both. She put them there every Sunday now, and he put them there on Wednesdays. Sarah and Mary, still there, still loved, but not the only thing left living. The porch boards creaked as he shifted in his chair. Inside, Grace hit a wrong note, laughed softly, started the measure again. The coffee cups sat empty on the rail between the 2 rocking chairs. The house remembered music. And for the first time in 4 years, Caleb Mercer believed in morning.